Well, it's finally time to finish this mower. Ever since the last video I did, this just been sitting right here in this spot, taking up space and gathering dust and junk around it. But I could really use this space and I need to get other stuff in here to work on. So we're finally going to take care of the one last big problem it has, which is the deck bearings. Now the previous owner is the one who removed the deck, and I got the mower with the deck already removed. He put new blades on it and he got a new belt for it, but when he found out that the transmission issue wasn't as simple as a belt replacement, that's when he decided to get a different mower, and I got it. Now it's very common for the bearings to go out on riding mowers. I've seen this a lot. I've replaced a lot of bearings before. This is going to be the first time I've made a video about it. So first of all, how do you know if the bearings are going out on your mower? Well, there's a quick and easy way to check them. You can do this with the deck still installed in the mower or with it removed. I'm doing it with the deck removed, obviously. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your deck belt off of the spindle pulleys. And the next thing you're going to want to do is to disengage the blade brake. Now these are the blade brakes right here. They're linked together by this eyelet on it right here. Now, the way I like to do this is to just take a tie down and just get on there. Just tighten it down, and you see now it's holding the blade brakes off of the pulleys. And you want to make sure that there's nothing rubbing on these pulleys when you do this. Next thing you're going to want to do is you want to just grab the pulley and try to move it up and down. And then try to move it side to side. Now what you're doing is you're checking for play in the bearings. Any play at all in the bearings means that they're going bad and you need to replace them right away. Now this one has just a tiny bit of play in either direction. This one doesn't have any play. But just because they don't have any play doesn't mean that they're still good. Because these bearings are both going bad, but this one doesn't even have any play. The next thing you're going to want to check is you're going to want to grab the pulley with your hand and just spin it and listen. You hear that noise it's making? Now let's check the other one. And that one doesn't even want to spin much. Now you can hear that when I spin these, they make a whole lot of noise. Now a good bearing is going to be nice and smooth and quiet. Now when they start to go bad, what's going to happen is they're going to get kind of rough. It may not be something you can feel by hand, but when you spin it, any noise it makes will be amplified through the mower deck. So if you hear any rumbling or kind of grinding when you spin your bearings, then they're starting to go bad. You can actually run them while they're making noises like this for quite a while, but it's not really recommended because you're not going to be able to hear when they're getting really bad over the noise of the mower most of the time. Now unfortunately, MTD doesn't actually list just the bearings for these mower decks in most cases. What they want you to do is they want you to buy the entire manual and spindle assembly, which can be kind of pricey. It's really not necessary since usually the only thing that's gone wrong is the bearings, and it's just kind of a pain. These bolts often break when you try to take them out. But there is a way to replace just the bearing itself, but you gotta get the old bearing out to make sure you got the right new bearing before you put it in. So you don't want to go out and just buy parts right away and then just start doing this. You really want to pull the old bearings out and see what kind they are before you go ahead and order parts. Now I've gone ahead and removed the belt guards. I released the blade brake a little bit so that they're pushing on the pulleys so that they hold them so I can get the nuts off. And I have it blocked up on two 2x4s on either side so that there is space for the spindle to come out. Now this process is going to be pretty easy if you have an impact wrench. If you don't have an impact wrench, it's probably going to kind of suck, because I've had cases where the impact wrench would not take these nuts off before, because they're on there pretty good. But most of the time they come off pretty easily. So what I'm going to do is just take the nut off. There goes the compressor. Go ahead and lock this blade brake off again. I'm dealing with a very small compressor right now because my big compressor is down, so it kicks on every time I use the impact. So I'll just pull the pulleys off now. I'm going to thread the nut back on a little bit. And hit it with a hammer. Now, I'm actually doing this with the blades still installed. You don't have to take them off if you don't want to. I'm going to lift them up and pull those spindles out. What I'm going to do now is take this drift, I'm going to stick it in there and just angle it like that a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to rest the end of the drift on the inner race of the bottom pulley, so we can pound that out. Alternate it periodically and blow our bearings out. Do the same on this side. Both bearings out. We'll flip it off now. Each spindle has 2 spacers in there, so you want to save those. And we have our bearings here. Now I'll take the drift, go ahead and pound the upper bearings out. Don't want to smash my fingers. Alright, we got all the bearings out now. And there's going to be 4 total, 2 per spindle. Alright, let's talk about bearings. So we have the 4 old bearings here. Now you're going to have 2 bearings per spindle. So if you've got 2 spindles, you're going to have 4. If you've got like 3 spindles, you'll have 6, etc., etc. Pretty much all these bearings are just completely shot. This is the smoothest one. You can hear that noise there. That's not very good. And then the rest are really freaking bad. And some of them don't even want to spin. Like this one's almost completely seized up, so these are going bad, real bad. But that's not what we care about at this point. We've got 4 brand new bearings here. I ordered these ahead of time because I know what usually goes in these, and it was worth it to have the parts on hand before. But if you're at home doing this yourself, you don't want extra parts laying around, you don't want to spend any extra money that you don't have to, then you're going to want to make sure you get the right bearing the first time. Now, on these bearings, these are double seal bearings. They have seals on both sides. Now, if we clean the dirt off of this bearing, because this is the cleanest one, there's not a chance that that's actually going to show up on the camera. Well, it might. But anyway, I'll just tell you what it says. Molded into these shields are going to be all the information you need on the bearing. Now right here is everything you need. This says 6204 RSC3. Now what that is 6204, that's the size of the bearing. RS means it's rubber seal. And C3 relates to the tolerances of the bearing. It's also got China, which is the place it was manufactured on it, and CCF molded into it as well. Now, the most important part is the 6204 because that designates the actual size of the bearing. 6204 is pretty much the standard size for most MTD mowers. Some of them are different. That's why I say you want to pull these out and check them yourselves before you go just ordering parts. Personally, I find it more worth it to have the parts on hand immediately. And I work on a lot of mowers, so if the bearings aren't right for this particular application, I'll just end up using them later on anyway. But when you buy these bearings, now you can go with either sealed bearings, which is what this one originally came with, or you can go with greasable bearings. Now most people prefer greasable bearings because they last a bit longer. I'm personally the opposite way. I prefer a sealed maintenance-free bearing because a high quality sealed bearing will actually last a lot longer than you expect. The original bearings in my Craftsman lasted 1,500 hours. Now 1,500 hours, that took me 10 years to put on that mower, and I mow a lot more than most people do. So if you're just a homeowner or you're only mowing for say maybe 2 or 3 hours a week or every other week, it's going to take you a very, very long time to put 1,500 hours on a mower. Now personally, I'd rather not have to worry about maintenance and just replace a bearing for $20 or so every 10 years than to have to get under there and grease the bearings constantly. Because greasable bearings have to be greased like every 10 hours or so. Otherwise they run dry and they fail in short order. So that's why I don't like greasable bearings. Now if you want to run greasable bearings, that's up to you. Now if you want to run greasable bearings, there's a few things you're going to have to do to be able to do that. First of all, you're going to need to either have the grease zerks already in the mandrels. Some mowers came with them, some didn't, most didn't. If you don't have those and you want to run greasable bearings, you're going to have to drill and tap the mandrels for a grease zerk. And the next thing you're going to do is related to the bearings you actually put in. Now what you're going to want to do is get a bearing that has a rubber seal on one side and is open on the other side, but is the same size as the bearing that came out. Now this is 6204 bearing, so you would want a 6204 1RS, which would come with a seal on one side and open on the other side. The other option is you could get a 6204-2RS that specifies that it has rubber seals on both sides. Now this one doesn't have two molded into it to specify the two rubber seals, but it does have rubber seals on both sides. So you do that and you just pop the seal off one side, and then the open side of the bearing would go down facing inward towards the mandrel. That way it would get grease when you fill it up with grease. Now if you aren't going to run greasable bearings and you're going to run sealed bearings like I am, what you're going to want to do is get a 6204 2RS, and that specifies that you have the rubber seals on both sides. Whether you want to get in a bearing that's exactly the same as what came out of there or you want to get a better one, that's really up to you. And the bearings I have here are just 6204 RS bearings. They have rubber seals on both sides. They're about a mid-range bearing. This is going to be a homeowner mower, so even with just a mid-range bearing, I'm confident that these will last a very, very long time in this particular usage. Alright, let's put the new bearings in. So we're going to start with the bottom bearings first. Basically we're going to do it the exact opposite way that I took them out. Now if you're using greasable bearings, you're going to want to make sure that the seal is towards the outside of the mandrel. And you're going to want to make sure that the inside of the mandrel is very, very clean, because any dirt or contaminants in there is going to end up in your grease, and that's going to wear your bearing out. If you're running sealed bearings like I am, you don't really need to worry about that much. Just wipe it out with a rag and that'll be fine. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the outer race of my bearing just so that it slides in better. Set that right in there. And the way I'm going to get this in is I'm going to take this impact socket, and you want to size your socket so that it fits on the outer race of the bearing. You do not want this socket to push down on the seal or the inner race, because having one that pushes down on either of those things is going to damage the bearing and it can fail again in short order. So you want it sized to the outer race. So you're going to set that on there. Use a clean socket or else you'll get the bearing all dirty, and just pound it in. You hear that change in pitch? That's when the bearing started seeing. So you just pound it in until you hear the pitch change and the bearing stops moving all of a sudden. That's how you know it's in all the way. So we'll do the other one. I'll try and do this quickly so I don't take up too much time with this video. Seated all the way. Pick it up, flip it over. Now just take the spacers, which I've already cleaned. I'm going to just drop one in there and then drop the other one right on top of it. I'll do the same for the other side. I'll take the bearing for the top, a little bit of grease, or I mean oil. Just add that in there. Take our socket and drive that in. And you can hear the pitch change, that's how you know it's in all the way. Do the other one, again, hurrying so that I don't take up too much time with the video. That's in all the way. And what I'm going to want to do is, those spacers have a lot of space to wobble around in there. So what you're going to want to do is take either your finger or a drift or something and just make sure that those are lined up. Otherwise the spindle will not go in there properly. Just clean. So we'll lift this up now and put our spindles in. Now when you do this, the spacers, they're probably not going to be lining up that great, so you want to make sure you line them up and just push it in slowly. Sometimes what can happen is when you try to push this in, it can pop the upper bearing out, and you really don't want to do that because then you gotta get it all back together again. So just slowly, and make sure everything's lining up. Make sure these spindles are in all the way. I'm just going to give them a light tap on the bottom. Alright, they should be seated now. Now I'll take our pulleys, and this side of the spacer goes down. Oh, looks like the we'll move that bolt out of the way. Looks like the blade lock shifted a little bit. There we go. Make sure it's engaging with the splines. Thread the nuts on. Take the impact and just impact them on. Some people might not like that I impact them on, but bottom line is they're supposed to be on there really tight, because otherwise they come loose and then they damage stuff. So spin them again. You hear how smooth that is now? That's the way it should sound. Hardly any noise at all. That's that's it. That's all it takes to replace your bearings in your lawnmower deck.